Hello, everyone. It's a lovely, very chilly evening in Nairobi. I am your host, Roslyn Miner, and tonight I am joined by Asha. Asha is joining us from Mauritius, and I think it's 8 o'clock in Mauritius. So, Asha, welcome, and it's such a lovely evening to have you here.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Asha, I think we have a bit of an echo on your end. Very chilly evening in Nairobi. I am your host, Roslyn Miner, and tonight I am joined by much better. I think the video was playing on another screen, but not to worry. Again, it's a lovely evening from Nairobi, Kenya. Welcome. I am Roslyn Miner. I am the managing partner and founder of Acamaran Consulting Limited, where we offer fractional HR services, but also run the Unplugged with Ross webinar series. Tonight, I am joined by Asha. Asha is joining us from Mauritius, as I just mentioned. Mauritius is 1 hour ahead of Nairobi in terms of time zones, so it's just after 8 in the evening. So for those that have joined us, thank you very much for joining us. Tonight's session is about rethinking growth from intent to innovation. And I'm so elated to have Asha join us tonight as we have this discussion. Just before I hand over to hand over to Asha to do the introductions and take us through this very exciting topic of the day, I would like us to have a bit of statistics. And on this, we have in consideration that our discussion for tonight is on growth. So when it comes to company lifespan, 50% of companies on the S&P 500 are expected to be replaced in the next 10 years. The average lifespan of a company has gone down from 61 years to 18 years, and that is a very worrying statistic. In sub-Saharan Africa, over 70% of SMEs do not survive beyond 5 years. That's a very worrying trend, consideration of the enthusiasm anyone who gets into business. But the fact that we have 70% of that not surviving, it's most unfortunate. Then 70% of organizations have a digital transformation strategy, and that is as per Tech Republic 2023, yet only 30% of digital transformation succeed. Okay. Last but not least, according to PwC, 83% of consumers think companies should actively shape ESG best practices which directly affect brand loyalty and growth potential. This is to do with sustainable growth, building for the long term. So, in regards to tonight's discussion, rethinking growth from intent to innovation, very critical topics that we need to evaluate and look into. And now I would like to welcome my panelists for the evening. Asha, welcome. Such a pleasure to have you here.
Hello, Rosaline. Thank you for having me here. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be on this platform. I've been following you since the first podcast, and very, very happy to be here.
Brilliant. So, going by the statistics that I've just shared, it's a worrying trend when you see that the lifespan of an organization is coming down from 61 years to 18 years. It's a very worrying trend. And we're talking about anyone that goes into business. You go into business to make money, you go into business for long term growth. Unfortunately, it seems that we lose the momentum along the way. So, Asha, take us through this very vital discussion and let's see how we can actually change and have the right processes, the right people, the right mindsets to ensure that business prospers on a long term.
Yeah, thanks, Rosaline, for the introduction. So, yeah, it is a very worrying trend, especially when you look into the startups in the technology industry. You'll see that about 70% of them have a lifetime of 5 years or less. So, it becomes even more critical to understand why we should grow sustainably, so that at least when we are going into business, we have a vision and we know that we are able to weather, the storms that are coming through. So when we talk from intent to innovation, it's for me, how do we weave in innovation into everything that we do? And how do we set our intent so that we are there for the long-term game, right?
Yeah.
So when we talk about sustainability, there are also two things that you would see. So when you do your search on Google right now, sustainability in a organization, we talk mostly about ESGs, so environmental, societal, and governance factors that would make a business sustainable in the long term. But for this conversation, I'm going to go very, very basic. Will come down to stripping down all the trimmings and come down to what makes a business really sustainable, and that's profit.
True.
I may have the best product in the world. I may give the best customer experience, but if I don't make profit at the end of the day, my business is not going to run for a long time, right? And no one goes into business to make losses. We all go into business to make profit. We all go into business to make money, right? So for me, when we talk about these very basic things, and I tend to base myself, on the basic accounting principles here. I mean, everyone who is in business, when they need to prepare the profit and loss account, they need to prepare the balance sheets, their cash flows. Um, their accountants will most probably talk about these two assumptions. The first one is going on concern. When you go into business, you already go with a mindset that your business is going to run for a long time. You can't go into business thinking that I'm going to close my business in 2 years, 3 years, right?
Yeah.
So this assumption, very basic and very important in businesses, in accountancy, is there for one, for you to be able to harness growth. Second, need to get investment. I mean, if you're not there for the long-term game, who is going to invest in your business?
True.
For you to be able to do budgets and forecasts, you need to know where you're going, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the first assumptions that business go through. And I think when we are running our businesses, we get so bogged down into the daily operations, we tend to lose sight of that assumption. And our accountants then needs to remind us about that. The second thing, basic principle in what I call in accounting is consistent growth. How do I achieve consistent growth is by getting profits. I'm resilient in my profit. I'm consistently earning profits. And basic accounting principle for profit is revenue minus expenses. So we take down all the trimmings and we focus on profits. And why do I want to go into these very basic um, principles is because to be able to be sustainable, we need to have very strong foundations, right? If our foundations are not strong, we are not able to weather the storms. And if you look at startups today, they grow so fast that you really have time to set down very strong foundations. If you look at even established companies, we really look at our foundations. You're looking at how we make more revenue. We are looking on how we grow our business, but we are not looking at those foundations. And the way things are changing now so quickly with technology, with globalization, with market trends, with wars in several countries, right? If our foundations are not strong, then we are not going to be able, to grow at a steady rate. We are not going to be able to make profits. We are not going to be able to maintain our business health.
True. I mean, I think most of the time when an organization, especially startups, in the current week of startup world, there's people talk about scaling,
Yeah.
but when you want to scale, you have to be building on top of something. So
Yes.
if your foundation is not strong enough, then how do you expect that accelerated growth to hold? Because I mean, you don't have strong beams, you don't have a strong foundation, it's just going to crumble. You will be, trying to cover up as you go. So yes, I totally agree. And even if I was to use the pandemic as an example, there are organizations that actually thrived during the pandemic. There are those that, they put into place the structures well in advance. And when the pandemic happened, business continuity was had already been, they had already practiced, they had already seen different scenarios and they thrived. But unfortunately, there are those that were directly or indirectly affected. So, how can we ensure that, regardless of the various factors that are coming in, the business thrives? Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you used, that you may alluded to beams because I love to compare, sustainability growth to the construction of a house. I mean, we in Mauritius, because we are so prone to cyclones, we've learned the hard way that we need to have very strong foundations for our
Yeah.
house. So
Yeah.
coming from houses made of wood and iron sheets, our parents, they learned the lessons that they need to build in concrete.
Yeah.
We need to have foundations that is going to sustain the winds of 120 kilometers per hour. They need to be able to sustain the rain. And then if you're building multi-story structures, how do you make sure that you are protected against those high winds?
Yeah.
And you would see that over the years, we've managed to build those strong foundations. And today, there are very few homes that get affected or get pulled down because of cyclonic winds. We may get issues from floods, but
Yeah.
cyclonic winds. So this kind of forward thinking, kind of making sure that the foundations are strong, is what we need to inculcate in our businesses as well. And yeah, and so most probably people are going to say, who has time to really look at all the foundations all the time, right? When
Yeah.
you're running a company that is growing very fast, you're looking at the next opportunity, you're making sure that you're able to deliver, you're scaling up your teams rapidly. Do you really have time to sit back and look at those foundations?
Yeah.
And this is where I think it's really, really important to actually take that step back and starting with the executives, because the roles of the executive, for me, very basically is to make sure that the business is sustainable, the business is going to run, come challenges, come hard times, we're able to run, right? Now,
Yeah,
if we as executives, we don't take the time to reflect often on those foundations, and we don't take time to adjust with the changes that is happening in the environment, market environment, then how will we sustain,
true.
right?
I mean, yeah.
Go ahead.
Now, you've made a very critical point where we fail to adapt to, the agility. How agile are we as a business to adapt to the incessant changes that come about, and especially now where we have tech changes in
Hmm.
every waking moment? Well, then as an organization, it's imperative that whatever dynamics are pushing towards the organization, we are smart enough to be agile enough to adapt to those changes as quickly as possible. And that means the culture of the organization is receptive to change.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And this gives me, a very nice segue into what I believe are the pillars of sustainable growth. How do we make, what kind of foundations do I need to put in place so that I'm making profit steadily, increasingly over the years?
Yeah.
And if you look at the company's life cycle, you know that you start up, you have an infancy stage, you would grow, then you would mature, then you would reach a peak.
Yeah.
And at that peak, you would start to go down. So the business is going to decline. So every business that is born, that is created, we know that it's going to decline at some point in time. Now, the rule or where we grow and where we make sure that we are sustainable is we either delay that maturity and peak as much as possible and
Yeah.
keep making profit. Or when we are at that peak, we plateau for a small while and then we grow again. Instead of taking that decline turn, we go up.
So consistency.
Consistent.
Consistent growth that is in has a positive trajectory. Yes, we may not have control over external factors, but internally the organization should aim for consistent growth instead of having plateaus and peaks and dips. That
Exactly.
just makes sense, makes
Yeah.
absolute sense.
Because that way, yes, growth might be delayed, growth might be slower, but it's steady, it's
True.
consistent.
Yeah.
And then it removes the pressure from you as executives as well. When I'm at the peak and I have a big slip, how do I grow up again? So the stress level is more erratic.
True.
And when you are running after those stress, you're making sure that you need to survive
Yeah.
when you have those dips. You have less and less time to focus on growth, steady growth, sustainability, because you're busy fighting fires.
So true. I mean, it borrows. I mean, when you look at the Tuckman model, the one that talks about forming, storming, norming, and performing,
Yeah,
all of that, for that to come into play, and that will happen with every organization. Yeah, if you want to avoid fighting fires with every waking moment, then it's important that, for example, when you do a SWOT analysis, you can actually map out what your threats are. What are those things that
yeah,
can actually wipe you out and take you out of business, and what can you do about it? So yes, fighting fires can actually derail you from the strategy that you have. It might be the best strategy, very well mapped out, But when it comes to the execution of it, you might find yourself fighting fires instead of growing and grooming the business strength by strength.
Yeah, yeah, fully agree, fully agree. So having said that, then what are those pillars for a strong foundation, right?
Yeah,
For me, there are four critical areas that we need to focus on, and we need to build onto to be
yeah,
able to be sustainable. The first one is vision, strategy, and executive alignment. The second one is the operating model. How
yeah,
am I going to do the business? The third one is my financial stability, right? And the
yeah.
fourth and most critical one for me is people. How do I bring my people together with me, right?
Yeah.
So these are what I've seen from the years I've been working with companies and trying to assess and analyze, what really makes a company tick, what really makes a company sticky, and what really makes it, able to face the storms that are coming ahead. And
No, oh, sorry.
how
No,
do I? Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, Asha. No, I was just affirming to the four key pillars. I mean, strategic vision, operating model, the revenue operations, and people. You're pretty much touching on all facets of on an organization. So there's the leadership part of it, the
Yes,
strategic, whatever, the leadership part of it. How do we, translate that strategy into something that is actually making sense and not a blocker?
yes,
And then, are we making money? I mean, we got into business to make money.
yes,
And then, who are the people that are, supporting this dream? So what's your dream team, and how is this dream team of yours set up, and how do they really understand how they contribute to the organization, that clarity of vision?
yes.
So take us through this, each of these pillars step by step.
Yeah. So before even going into those detailed pillars, I want to bring in another concept here is, and I touched upon it at the beginning, is how
Yeah,
do I build it innovation into all these pillars
yeah,
and to make innovation the DNA of my organization? Because if I'm not able to innovate, if I'm not able to adapt, if I'm not able to make continuous improvement, my pillars are going to grow weak and they might become a blocker in the future.
absolutely. And especially when you have yes people surrounding you, then
Yes.
you really don't get to groom new ideas and new ways of working.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like the definition that the Global Innovation Management Institute has of business innovation. So business innovation from the Global Innovation Management Institute is anything that you do that will create and will capture new value, and you do it in new ways. So we are not talking about, big breakthrough innovations. We are just talking about those small things that we can do that will continuously bring new value, and we find new ways of doing things.
I like that definition because it actually makes us embrace the simplicity of improving any systems that we have,
Yeah.
because more often than not we think innovation, or the mindset we have towards innovation, is this big ballsy item that is coming through,
Yes.
yet we fail to appreciate the what we would deem small improvements that actually have the greatest, most positive impact across board. So yes, that's a very enabling, so to speak, way to actually define and embrace innovation for what it really is.
Yes. And it also means, and what I like about this framework also is that innovation in your organization does not mean that it's unique to your organization. It can have been done in other companies.
Yeah.
If you have a global company, it might have been done in one of the subsidiaries. But when you are adapting it to your organization and it's bringing you new value, you're doing things in new ways, then you're innovating. And if you analyze it in a more, simplistic manner, we would say that it's continuous improvement.
Now that is more relatable to many.
Yes, exactly. So, for example, in your practice as HR, if you had, in your recruitment process, you used to have 5 steps to recruit somebody new, and you managed to bring those 5 steps to three, and
Yeah.
your turnaround time from advertisement to recruitment gets reduced. Let's say from 1 month to 3 weeks. You have innovated. You have created value because you have the time, most
True.
time. You've changed your ways of doing things. So it's a new way of doing things. So
Yeah.
if you fit that into the definition then of business innovation from the Global Innovation Management Institute, you have innovated.
Absolutely. I mean, when you look at it, there's the time saved, but also resources that have been saved, not only by the individuals that are doing the talent acquisition, but also to the people that are affected with the excess workload.
Exactly.
So when you look at it on a broad spectrum, there are a lot of savings that you have had. And it actually even improves the candidate experience. So there are a lot of positives that come with, redoing or rethinking a process in this case.
Yeah. So what we tend to do that we think that innovation should be that big thing, should cost us a lot. It will cost us a lot of money. Am I going to get return on investment? And we tend up delaying, these improvements that we could do.
Yeah,
While when you break it down into small components, you find that you're making progress steadily. You're changing ways of doing things. You're capturing new value steadily. And over time, you would see that, yes, I have been able to transform actually from where I was point A year one and where I am now, point C in year four. I have made significant progress.
absolutely. I think one of the misconceptions we have about innovation is thinking that it has to be something big, something new, something that is going to cost money.
Yes,
Yet, when you have process improvement, maybe there was duplication of tasks. Maybe, for example, you and I are responsible for, I need to input the information and then you need to raise an invoice. But the question is, why can't I input the information and raise the invoice at once? So if we are to get rid of that duplication and delays in terms of service delivery, that in itself is innovation, going by that,
yes,
the definition of it, the true definition of it. And I think a lot of organizations or a lot of leaders fail or feel that, you have to have the budget, you have to have the program, you have to have the application for you to create that change. Yet sometimes you just need to tweak, a very simple tweak to enable that positive growth or that change.
yes, yes. And the reason why I wanted to discuss this before we go into the details of the pillars is how can we use that concept? How
Yeah.
can we use this thought pattern to innovate into those 4 pillars and to make sure that over the years we are able to adapt? How do we make sure that our pillars are strong enough to adapt to those small incremental changes instead, of having a big hammer coming in and crush everything down?
Yeah, because I mean, even when it comes to mindset, a lot has to be changed. A lot of, the way we see things, the way we deliver to the actions that we're taking, all of that is heavily impacted. So Yes, I think it's a positive thing to think, and especially now that we are talking about rethinking growth,
Yes.
from intent. For what the true definition of intent, is the ambition to growth, which is now growth is prosperity and all things nice. So how do we support that?
Yeah. And here again, I would borrow from the framework of Global Innovation Management Institute on how to manage innovation. I would borrow from that to weave it into these pillars, right? So
Yeah,
let's talk about the first one. And here again, we are going to strip all the trimmings. We are going to ask some very basic questions.
yeah,
And what I would like to do is to trigger thought patterns, trigger people to start thinking, let's think out of the norm for once, right?
yeah,
Instead of running after the cliches, running after the way we usually do things. And let us rethink. Maybe there are ways we can improve that we didn't think about.
yeah,
So when we go into the vision, strategy, and alignment, right? The vision for me is the intent. I'm setting my vision, I'm setting my intent of where I want to be in X number of years,
yeah.
right? Now, in how many companies do everybody really understand each and every word of that vision, of that intent that has been set? I mean, from HR, you will know that we normally put the vision on the walls, we put it in documents, we put it on our performance appraisal forms, and then we know it's there, but we really don't know the meaning behind. We
True.
really don't know the intent behind. And how many of us really take the pain to go and make sure that each and everyone in the organization really understands what we are trying to do? How
True.
many of us executives walk the talk of that vision,
Yeah.
right?
Sometimes
So
there's a disconnect.
there is a disconnect, and this happens more often when the founder of the company is no longer in the company.
Yeah.
So when the founder is creating the company, he's creating the company with a specific vision. He knows where he wants to go. The passion is there, the purpose is there. Now, as the company grows, how much is that vision diluted,
True.
right? How much of that vision is really transmitted to each and every executive team member?
Well, most of the time when an organization or a company is starting, when it's at its initial stages, when the team is tiny, small, the bond is usually greater. People actually can, they're pretty much like the owners of the business. But as the organization grows, it dilutes the purpose of it, everything, the understanding. It just continues to dilute to the extent that whatever the initial intention of the business, someone can actually not explain it in in the most simple of manner. It's very vague, and therefore it actually gets to show that if that message is not inculcated in our everyday actions, then the whole purpose of it will not last. It's just going to be another document or another print on the wall or the handbook or whatever documentation there is. It's going to be there as a tick box, but not for the true value for what it is.
Yeah. So having that intent and having that vision is so important to be able to make that business sustainable, right? To make sure that stays in the long run. So then my question and my thought here is, do the executives think that they should be able to take, I don't know, one day every quarter to rethink that vision, to see whether all our activities are really living up to that vision. If the founder is not there, have I made sure as a founder that that vision has been transmitted properly? So, in terms of strategy, there for me is the question is, should I, in every job that I design, in every task that I design, include how that contributes to the vision?
Well, there is the other side that can be most unfortunate, where founders hold onto the mission, the vision, the purpose of the organization, that they are not willing or open enough to adapt to the reality. And therefore, the people sitting around you no longer challenge your thinking, no longer challenge that intention. They just rubber stamp it because they do not have the space to actually do that.
Exactly, exactly. And that's something that down the line becomes a blocker to growth.
True, true.
So when we are working on our vision strategy and our executive team alignment, one, we don't need to forget that, and we often tend to, that our executives are working for a salary as well, right?
True. Yeah,
They come in to earn a paycheck at the end of the day.
true. I mean,
Now,
it's for service rendered.
yeah, exactly. Now, from there, how do I ensure that my executive is buying into the vision? How do I make sure that on top of their basic requirement of earning a paycheck, they are all aligned to the strategy that we are setting up? How we make sure that they are so into it that I won't say salary becomes secondary, but they have moved up to the second level on the Maslow hierarchies of needs, right? And then
Yeah.
eventually they move to the third one. Because when they have bought in, when they are willing to walk the talk, when they are not just coming into the boardroom to say yes to whatever the founder or the chairman or whoever has the upper hand at that time,
Yeah.
uh, don't come in just to say yes, but they are willing to openly contribute, and their contribution is accepted, acknowledged, debated, so that it's really there in the DNA of the company. Yes, we are open. We are willing to accept changes. We are willing to break silos in that executive team. Then yeah, then we can say, okay, we are building a strong pillar where vision, strategy, and alignment is concerned. I mean, in how many companies we've seen that, um, executive walking into the boardroom, they already have a preconceived idea of what's going to happen.
It happens a lot. It happens a lot, and everyone has their own agenda. As long as their agenda is met, they really don't care for the next person, where they fail to understand that each and every one of them is actually a key pillar to the foundation of this organization. So, where their their mindsets, their intentions, and how they will do business is not, they're not speaking the same language, then that discord is only going to funnel down.
Exactly. Misalignment at the top ends up in descent at the bottom of the ladder.
True. And it actually gets even harder to break the silos when it trickles down, because people look up to their managers. So if their line managers, be it in the same function or cross functional, if they are not together, then where should they put the effort? So that descent, it's just going to make it harder and harder to realize the growth that is needed for the organization.
Yeah. So for me, that's one major blocker. but which can be turned into an enabler,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah.
when you convert that into an enabler, you're already changing ways you do things and you're already creating value.
True.
So I'm
True.
innovating, right? So
Yes.
the day my boardroom doesn't become a forum where people say yes, doesn't become a forum where everybody is only thinking about their own functional departments, that day, I can say that I'm building a very strong pillar for sustainable growth. So, for example, today, how many people in the boardroom really understands what are the factors and what are the criteria I need to take into account when I'm running a digital transformation project?
Very few.
You would have one person who is, of course, the sponsor of the idea, would understand everything. But then, does the CEO really understand if he's not the one who's sponsoring the project?
Not really. And you have to pull up your socks to actually make him or her buy into it.
Exactly. Um, does my CFO understand what are the implications of a digital transformation project?
Not to forget, the CFO will be looking at how many zeros you intend to spend. So you have to show value for that.
Does my head of HR, my head of people know all everything that is involved in a digital transformation project? Just remember that person is managing people,
True.
right?
And the question is what they're doing reactive, or have you mapped it out correctly? You are actually business partnering and not just taking orders and thinking, okay, Asha told me so, but why did Asha tell you so?
Yeah. So in that room, at the end of the day, you would have the sponsor who would understand. You have the CIO, CTO would
Yeah.
understand, and the rest of the people. If effort is not made for them to understand, they will just say yes at the end of the day. And then what happens? The day you come with a project, you run the numbers and you see the cost that is associated to that project. The first question that you will get from the CFO is, what is my return on investment?
Is it necessary?
Is it necessary? How
Why
is
are
it
we
going
doing
to
it?
improve productivity? How is my revenue going to be increased? Right?
Yeah.
And digital transformation projects by nature, they don't bring ROI, return on investment, immediately.
No.
It's a long-term game.
Yes, because even the implementation of it is not instant.
Yes,
It's also a long term game. So when the project is scoped out, it's not a 2 day affair. It can take months, if not years.
exactly. Then, if by chance the KPI for your CFO is that you need to reduce expenses by 15% this year, and you come with a digital transformation project that instead of decreasing cost is increasing cost. And if you look at the model that we currently work with, software licenses or subscription based projects, you run them in small installments, agile.
Yeah.
So you're not capitalizing on the project. So what would happen is traditionally, previously, you would run the whole project, you would put a big figure in your balance sheet, and you would expense it slowly over the years. That's based on accounting
Yeah.
principles. Now you can't no longer do that because that expense has happened within a year, and you're using the product within the same year. So your profit and loss get hit immediately.
Yes, but unfortunately, we fail to see the positives of the implementation. What losses, what has improved, time wise, resource wise, because you will save, and by that, the more you're saving, the more you're having a positive impact to the profits that you're supposed to make.
Exactly. So when you go from that mindset right from the beginning, when you're setting up your strategic team, and you say that you ensure that your strategic team is aligned. They are all aware of the implications of all projects that you're doing. And you put down KPIs that are more profit focused rather than focus on expenses, focus on increasing revenue. Because I might say, I might put my KPI to say, okay, revenue increased by 15%. But to get that revenue of 15%, I'm expending 20% more. So where does that leave me in terms of profit? Where does that leave me in terms of cash flow?
True.
So that's the first pillar. How we make sure that, uh, okay, so there's a question here. Uh, how do you ensure that your team really embraces digital transformation so as to give it a good ROI? That's a very good question. So in here, there is one thing that I tend to prune is the executive team. Firstly, every one of them should spend at least one day every year getting trained on the implications of digital transformation projects, to understand the new trends, to understand how those projects are managed, to understand what kind of resources you need
Yeah.
to be able to get those projects up and going. And then the definition of return on investment for digital projects is not the same as the traditional
Return on.
definition of return on investment. Because digital projects, they don't give you return on investment. They don't give you that, they don't impact your revenue directly. They're an enabler to you to get your revenues. They're an enabler for you to reduce your expenses. But they are not the one that are really generating that revenue. Or they are not the one that are decreasing your costs. Right? So for me, first step is to ensure that your executive team is aware and they know what are the trends coming in. They know how those projects are run and they fully buy into that. They know how it's going to impact your strategy. They know that how it's going to impact your day-to-day operations. They know how it's going to impact your operations, daily operations, your teams. Now, when everybody has that same level of understanding, it's easier to cascade down,
Yeah.
right? So strategic team understands all the implications, all the goings on, all the resources. We go then to the tactical level, the one who would be executing together with the operational level, right? And that information should go seamlessly from top to bottom,
Yeah.
that understanding, that flow. And everybody understands why we are doing that project. Yes, it's going to disrupt the way I do things. But why is it important for me to do that? What is the real purpose behind? Am I really just doing that project because it's the current trend and it's a buzzword? Or is it really going to bring value, new value to my business,
True.
right?
Yeah.
So I also like to think about, we use root cause analysis in a lot of issues. Tend to go to the 5 whys,
Yeah.
right? But do we do that for digital projects before we start it,
Uh,
or for any other kind of project?
You've said something very critical. Why are you investing in digital transformation? When you look at the pillars of digital transformation, it's systems, people, process. When you go down the route of digital transformation, you are looking out for automation, making work easier, being more efficient. Data is king nowadays. How can you leverage that data to give you insights on
Yeah.
future results? So when we go to, the unfortunate thing is, and I think it's not just limited to digital transformation, is when scoping out a project, a lot of people are not interested to dig deep because it requires you to, it's like taking an onion and peeling out each and every layer of an onion. It's painful, it is tasking, you're wondering why are you getting into it, it actually brings to the fore more problems than you anticipated. But if you know the why you're getting into it, then you will have the opportunity to actually see all the problems at hand and see which are the most critical and which are those that can be phased out. So I think when it comes to digital transformation or any project for that matter, it is the genuinity of people to really embrace a project for what it is, not because it is a task, but because it's a critical need for the organization if it is going to survive and thrive.
Fully agree on that. And then what also important is for people to understand, the team members to understand what it does to their day-to-day operations when you're running a project in parallel. We tend to forget to inform them that your workload is going to increase, or we tend to forget to ensure that we have enough resources available so that daily operations are not impacted, but projects are running in parallel as well. And we get hit when you are in crunch time, peak time, your project is running in parallel, and then you no longer have resources to work on the project, and the project deadline is close as well,
Yeah.
right? And that's when you start having conflicts between operations and the projects team, right? But at the end of the day, the project team is enabling the operations team, and you can't get a project, be it any kind of project, you can't make it stick if your operations teams are not involved, if all your teams are not involved, because at the end of the day, you are delivering either a tool for them to work on daily. Now, if they are not involved, if they don't understand what's happening, if they don't understand the workload during the project and after the project, what is going to happen, then it's not going to help them anymore. And I think we've transitioned into a bit of the people side of things here.
No, but I think your point is very valid in terms of the importance of having a good communication blueprint. We fail in any project implementation because we fail to communicate well. We fail to provide end to end, the impact of it, be it positive or negative. We fail to communicate how that is going to impact the day to day. We fail to communicate the value of it, and it's not just to the team that is concerned, but also the leadership itself. Are they actually emulating that? Because it is deemed that if this task has been given to, for example, Rosalind, everyone just assumes that if you want anything to do with the status of the project, go ask Rosalind. But if everyone was to have that clear communication, then it shouldn't be very hard to understand when there is a delay, when changes need to be made, when you need to go to the ground and listen to people. And that by itself is part of, this pillar of strategic vision, communication. It's part and parcel of it. So if we're not emulating it, then what are we doing?
Exactly, exactly. And it starts from the top. If in the executive team, people don't believe in the project, don't buy in the project, they don't see the value it's going to bring,
Yeah,
how are they going to bring that down to the different levels,
true.
right?
Very true.
If they
Yeah.
don't understand what's happening, and if they only look at the end result, but they have no idea what happens in between, then how is that going to happen? And then there's something that often happens in all type of projects, right? Uh, what we'll do is, and it often happens that you'll find all those big buzzwords trending on social media. You go to all those conferences, you go to all those seminars, webinars where they're talking those buzzwords, and you hear that you should be doing that. And then you'll have some very good consultants who will come in and tell you, you should be doing this. This is what's going to bring your business forward. But I, as an executive team member, I don't really understand. identifications. I don't have the knowledge to analyze whether that big trendy buzzword project is really going to bring value to my organization or not. I'm going to do it because that's the trend.
And it becomes a very costly trend, and most unfortunate when organizations are very quick to bring the consultants. No hate to the consultants, I'm one myself.
Yeah,
But when you fail to listen to your internal wealth, your people, whoever is engaged directly or indirectly with the project at hand, if it takes an external party to drive that point across, then it tells
exactly.
enough about the organizational culture there.
Exactly, exactly. And that's where I come back to my point that executive teams should take at least one day every year and understand what the trends are, understand how that's going to how is that's going to impact their project, their day-to-day rights. How is that going to improve their business? Right? Like
Yeah.
for example, just before you do your budgeting exercise, when you say, "Oh, I'm going to just put in, let's say, 20% of my revenue on a project next year." Do I take the time before I go into that budgeting exercise to rally around my team, my executive team, for us to sit down and really think and reassess where am I on my foundations? Where do I want to go in my intent? How far I am from the intent that I had set out? Do I really know how my company is operating? Am I still operating the way I wanted to?
It's
Do my customers still have the same preferences?
true. I mean,
Right?
it makes one think, in the sense, sometimes we will be very quick to judge direct reports when it comes to stakeholder management. But as leadership, what stakeholder management do we do amongst ourselves? Do we understand, the needs and the preferences of, say, what your client needs, your external customer, your internal customer, and then how do you use those insights to actually contribute in driving a decision?
Exactly. Exactly. So for me, that's really important. When we before we go into a budget exercise, it's the right time to assess where we are on our foundations and whether
Yeah.
those foundations are going to sustain the future.
Yeah.
Right? So this is a very interesting point. What about having a person to connect executive and the other employees within the organization, and what of the HRs? HR, I'll leave you to talk about that, for since that's your expertise. The connection between executive and other employees, that's really important as well. If you really have, in an organization, somebody who understands how the executive think, how the functional tactical layer think, and how the operational people think. And because most of the time everybody is so busy in their day-to-day activities, right? They don't really have time to do that. And I tend to think that there should be one person in the organization which is not involved in operations, who is who has that role actually to be able to disseminate information from executive level to all the different layers that we have in the organization. But not only that, that person is also talking to your consultants where for all the projects that you are running, so that the objective that you have set internally, you are able to make sure that that objective is carried across on all your projects, vertically, horizontally, cross-functionally, and that information transfer. And the reason why that person should not be in operations for me is for that independence, right? You need to have that cross-functional layer of person who is able to talk to all levels, but who is not biased, right? Who is
Yeah.
not biased for a particular function, who is not even biased or the executives, but there to drive the objectives of the organization. Your thoughts on that, Rosie, and what about the role of HR there?
One, I agree with the sentiments that you have, you've shared, but also I think one of the misconceptions people have about HR is that HR, one, is a standalone function. It's not. I'll give you an example. When you are recruiting talent acquisition, if I'm recruiting for a sales manager, I will not be the line manager. The line manager is a critical piece in that talent acquisition. They are actually the hiring manager. So when we fail to understand the contribution each and every line manager executive has and the impact they have on the talent within the organization, then when things fail, the blame will go to HR. Because when it comes to a bad hire will come in when, for example, I as HR assume that I know everything about sales and fail to involve the hiring manager. I bring in a candidate, and once they come in, someone wonders, how did you even get here? Performance management, another example, performance management fails when, when you're there as the line manager and you take it as a tick box. But then when you want to get someone out, that is when you're plugging in HR. So we really need to break it down because people cut across. And HR may not have the tendons like an octopus to be there. So they will bring people together and they need to listen. But the people that are the immediate touch point of this talent need to participate and actively do the right thing as we cut across.
Definitely, definitely, and that is critical because HR is such a critical role, and unfortunately, they don't get enough visibility in the organization. And this is more so now because when we think about how technology is taking over, right? With all the new AI things coming in, with all the new automation that is happening, we know that there are going to be jobs which will no longer exist, right? We all know that all those manual, repetitive tasks will be handled by technology. And as a business, the only way I can keep my customers happy would be when I refocus my people onto human connections, right? The only thing that AI or technology cannot emulate, and they are not there yet, they might come, emotions, heart, soul, having that human, very human connection with somebody, technology is not there yet. And whenever you are buying a service or a product, I mean, for everybody, you and I, we assess that product with emotions, right, with our senses. A bot will be able to sell that product to us. They have all the right scripts, they have all the specifications, the advantages, the disadvantages, they have all of them. But if I don't get the feel that the product is right for me, if my emotions are not triggered, then I'm not going to buy that product or I'm not going to buy that service. Now, in a business which is selling product or service, we are not selling to robots. We are not selling to technology. We are selling to people.
Yeah.
Now, how do we reorient our strategy to make sure that we value people so that they are able to sell those emotions, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that's very critical that we need to think about. And HR there is a critical function. And when you look at those executives in the boardroom, HR has a very key role to play.
True.
And when we are breaking down silos between departments, when we are creating cross-functional teams, HR is not only there, for the traditional uh, functions of HR, recruiting, talent management, succession planning, and all that. They have their say in the whole strategy of the company. How do we bring those emotions in, right?
Sure.
So that for me is the role of HR in there, and how we should really break those silos between uh, the strategic team,
Yeah.
right? So, so moving on, I think we've spent a lot of time on that first pillar because it is really very important to discuss that. The second pillar is our operating model, right? So in our operating model, where we are thinking about, how with that product, how with that service we produce, how are we going to achieve the right mix on on technology, people, processes, because that's where my operating model is. How am I going to deliver
Yeah.
that product? So here again, something very sensitive: technology. Technology keeps on changing, and we are heading out into very fast into advancement in technological processes. So that pillar being the core of delivery, the core of making sure that my product or services are there in the market. Um, we need to really think about then how do we align whatever strategy that we have put in place? How do we take that strategy and convert it into an operating model that is going to be sustainable over the time and that is going to deliver me what I want to deliver, right?
Yeah.
So the question here then is, how often do I look at that operating model? How often do I reassess that operating model? How how aware are the people at all levels of that operating model, or do they only know that bit piece that they work on?
More often than not, that is the trend. We only pay attention to what is required of me, because unfortunately, most of the time, that is what is delivered or communicated to me. The other pieces of the jigsaw puzzle are never highlighted. They're usually blurry, so I'm only paying attention to what is needed of me. But
Yeah,
that is where we need to change that mindset.
that's also an after effect, I would say, of industrialization, where we had so heavy division of labor, and you you would recall that at that time in textile factories, you would deliver on a piece rate basis. So if you're sewing on a sleeve of a shirt, that's the only thing that you need to do,
Yeah.
right? And that's the only thing that you need to know. And this has somewhat come down into our corporate world as well.
Okay.
Somebody who is doing a job, they already know that specific job, right? And they are not really aware of where that piece of the puzzle that they are building is going to fit into the bigger picture. Now, my engagement level, if I don't know where in that big puzzle I am and how I'm contributing to building that big picture, it's low compared if I knew exactly what I was contributing, right? So very important there as well. So the second pillar is about operating model. We are talking about operating model now on on how the product or service we produce, what are the technology, people, processes that we need to put in place to be able to deliver, and how we would deliver. So we are now into the how we do things. In strategy, we were around the whys and what. Now we've moved on to the how. to do things, right? So operating model is a result, of course, of that first pillar, but it's also a very strong one for us to be able to work on, for us to be able to innovate, and this is what is going to take forward our intent to work on. Um, Now, how does the challenges of the current world impact those? If I'm taking a lot of time before I do my improvements, before I do my innovation, if the world is running faster than I am, then how am I going to be able to catch up? That's one. The second thing is, in terms of processes, automation is coming there, right? And we need to be able to review our playbooks
Yep.
on how we make sure that our playbooks are still valid for the current market. For example, if I used to deliver my service in person, and the current trend says that the Gen Zs, for example, they prefer an online delivery of the service. And if I'm still stuck on my traditional ways of doing things, then I'm affecting that pillar and I'm not strong enough. I'm not moving fast enough. And again, we go back to that awareness of what your market needs, that awareness of what delivery channels are working now, that awareness of how much lead time I have before I'm delivering a product. So let's say for the same product service, your competition is delivering 2 times faster than you are. People will go to your competition,
True.
right? So that awareness is critical.
That actually makes me recall, Kodak,
Yeah.
the company. When digital cameras came into play, they they stuck to film,
Yes.
and everyone was going the digital way. They missed a critical opportunity to the extent that Kodak is hardly there. You know,
Yeah.
when you look at back in the day, we used to get VCRs when it comes to
Mm.
movies. You go rent movies, and then the likes of Netflix came into play. So if you fail to adapt to what the market is demanding, we are not saying that you should, throw away everything that makes you uniquely you. But when you fail to adapt to, the current demands in terms of service delivery, in terms of technology, then it doesn't matter how good your strategy is, it's bound to fail. And as you've correctly said, people will go to your competition because your competition is actually delivering it quickly, and that speed is what they are seeking. So whatever your operations are, then you need to look at what is it that people are looking for. you know
Yeah.
you're not
Simple example. If you look at my case, I hate going shopping. I hate going into a shop and spend hours trying to find things that I will need. And I find it easier now online and gets delivered to my home, right?
Makes
So
sense.
if that shop that I used to like a lot does not do home delivery, I'm not going there anymore.
Sad but true, yes.
Yeah. So that's a phenomenon that's very, very rampant right now in Mauritius. All the shops, they are being forced to do home deliveries.
Failure to
All
which
the
you lose your
shops are being
market.
forced to sell online because people are going less. I mean, apart from the basic necessities, and there are people who still like to go shopping in shops, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But most of the youth, they prefer to buy online now.
It's convenient, it's saving you time you know
Exactly. So that kind of thing again, it comes down from strategy. If I'm reviewing my strategy every year, if I'm reviewing the market, if my team is so on top of what's happening in the market, and I make sure that every year I get those information and I build that into my budget, and then I build that into my operating model, I'm making sure that I'm sustainable. I'm making sure that my profit is not going to take a big dip because my customers are running away from me,
Yeah, makes
right?
sense. No, it makes sense. The need to be agile, the need to have your ears on the ground, and to have that intention, not just for the sake of it, but having that candid review about the way you do things and what is being required of you and what changes can you do without breaking the bank. You
Yes,
know,
yes,
some may take a longer time. Maybe some people are thriving in that, for example, maybe online shopping, but they have invested in those systems. Maybe they came much later when that business was coming in, it was the norm. So it is, how can you ensure that you do not lose your USPs, but also ensure that you are using technology as an enabler, but also ensuring that you have your ears on the ground and doing right by what
yes,
is needed.
yeah.
The,
So the question that's just been put online here is, if technology is not there yet, how can we really prepare enough to outsmart the artificial intelligence text? Um, so there is something that I've seen happening here locally in the market. Those small shopkeepers, they don't really have a lot of money to invest immediately into an online e-commerce system, but they are adapting. They are selling on Facebook.
yeah,
They are selling on TikTok. So while waiting for them to get those e-commerce platforms
yeah,
that are really intelligent for them to enable a lot of things, they are already adapting themselves to the new market needs. There are a lot of sales on WhatsApp happening as well, right?
yeah.
So they are finding means and ways to reach their customers online without investing a lot of money into tech.
True.
They are using the available means. And why are they able to do that? Because they're aware of what their current customers are looking for. They are aware on which platforms their customers are,
True.
right?
Yeah.
If I didn't know that my customers were on Instagram, I wouldn't post on Instagram. If I didn't wasn't aware that my customers look at my WhatsApp stories, for example, I wouldn't post on that. So there are that awareness of what's happening in the market is critical. And then once you start building up your customer base online, you can start investing into online systems. You would do it gradually, but you're already capturing your audience, I would say. And then you will just transition them to another platform.
No, very true. And just to buff up onto what you have said, when it comes to AI, and if you are to look on an African perspective, it is not that Africa is not ready for the extent of AI advancement that we see in places like Japan and China. It's just that in, in our respective countries, we have not been intentional enough to invest in these systems. Is it by design, or is it, there are people that thrive in messes, but I don't think that is what the vast majority of Africans, that's not what we want. But the truth of the matter is, for us to fully embrace the positives of AI, it calls for, you know, the every government being very intentional about not only the use of AI, but also the structures, the legal structures. Because, for example, like fintech, A lot of fintech companies will even get the funding, but they will not thrive for many years because we do not have the compliance systems, the data protection systems, all these vital environments that will enable this business to thrive. So AI is here and it's not going anywhere any moment soon. It's going to advance with every passing day. However, for for any organization, for any country to thrive, we really need to be intentional and ensure that, the same way we are talking about organizations is how we are running our respective countries. If we are to actually get the full advantage of what AI has to offer.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. There is still that big question of ethics around AI.
Yeah.
Whether the data that they are giving out is really sound, or is it training data that has been given to like that, because they are using data, right?
Yeah.
And whatever data you feed it, that's what's going to happen. Yeah, so this is interesting. So Isra says that I have noticed on these big companies, they do really well in marketing, listening to your clients and giving them the products and the services we require. True, because they are investing a lot on those marketing campaigns or on the marketing research, and they have the funds to do those. And because we are on this subject now, I think we can transition on the third pillar, which is financial stability, right?
Yeah.
So when we talk about having enough funds to invest into your marketing research, enough funds to invest in your automation projects, enough fund to spend on learning and development, do we, as executives or as leaders of the company, put away a sum of money every month or every year on that? So, for example, if I tell you today, Rosin, are you willing to put 30% of your profits away every year for research and development? What would
Most
you say?
likely, at this moment in time, if I was to do like a typical business trend, it would be no. Yet it is very important.
Right. Because yes, we are in the business to make money. Our investors are giving us money to invest, but they are expecting a return on that. Now, if I tell you to cut their share of cake and to put that into research and development, to put that into investing into your growth, be it your digital growth, be it your people growth, be it your marketing research, be it your strategic research, right? Because these things cost money.
Yes, they do.
They cost money. If I'm not willing to invest, if I'm not willing to put away a percentage of my profit to do that every year, am I not stalling my growth?
You are, and it's simply because you are operating on old data, not current data. So you are not really hitting the pain points that are being faced by your by your client and the current version of needs.
Yes. So that's something, and then again, this requires alignment with your shareholders, with your investors, right? If going in, you already discuss and agree that out of our profit, we will keep 30% for reinvestment into the business in terms of research and development. And they agree to that. You know you have a very strong support to grow,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And and when I'm talking here, I'm talking profit. I'm not talking top line. Now, we come down to that same question. How do I get my profit? My profit is revenue minus expenses,
Yeah.
right? So it's very critical for me to have a very strong and robust revenue structure architecture in place. How do I manage my revenue operations? How do I make sure that my strategic and operational teams are working together to generate my revenue that I need,
Yep.
right?
True.
And this is where also we break that silo mentality and we get sales, marketing, and customer experience team to work together to deliver towards one target. This is also where we need to make sure that all the supporting departments, what we call supporting the departments, but what I would call an enabling department, finance, HR, IT,
Yep.
they are all working together hand in hand to deliver and for us to be able to get those revenue that we need, right? We need to increase revenue to be able to do that. So, thought-provoking question here. What if in the organization we decide as executive that we are going to eliminate all KPIs? We are going to keep only one. And that KPI is we work towards profits. So everybody has the same KPI for this year. We need to achieve 20% increase in profits.
I think it would be interesting because with every strategy, it has to be cascaded down to each department. And when you break it down to the department, the translation of it, how are we going to contribute to this profit? There are functions that are, they're number based, marketing, sales. They directly impact the numbers. Someone sells, you actually do see the numbers. But sometimes there will be these other functions that someone might say, but how are you look like an expense center and not, you're not bringing in revenue. We need to change that mindset as far as I'm concerned, because, for example, IT, the technology that any organization uses, if that technology is making work easier, it's enabling efficiencies within the organization, they are contributing to the revenue, they are contributing to the profit. When you look at the people function, when you hire right, you have the right people doing the job, which they are they have clear understanding of each and every responsibility that role entails. They Then the people function is contributing to the profits. So we really need to walk away or undo the thinking of, if you are not doing that sale or if you are not doing the retention, then you're not contributing to profit. No, because a lot may happen in the centers of excellence that people actually don't put close attention to.
Yeah, and I think um, generating revenue, generating profit for the business is why we are recruiting people. I mean, if somebody in the organization was not contributing to my revenue, to my profit, why would I need that person in the organization?
Good question.
Right? And I think there is something that's really critical here that we need to think about. IT is not a cost center. HR is not a cost center. Today, these are the two things that are going to make my company sustainable, right?
True.
And they have their place in the boardroom.
Yes, they do.
They have to be able to contribute to strategy. They have to understand the company's strategy so that they are able to cascade down and bring down ideas, or they have to bring down the talent, the technology that you need to be able to make those profits, right?
Yeah.
Admin people in the admin department, they contribute to the profit as well. Because if they were not there to do those administrative tasks that you have to do, where would your business be? Who would do that for you?
You would not even have the time to pay attention to what is critical, bringing in the business. The admin tasks are critical, but you need people that will support that drive.
Yeah. So in terms when we talk about financial stability, We need to talk about the role everyone has to play into contributing those revenue or into decreasing those expenses. And my thought of, if I eliminate all KPIs in the organization and I keep only one KPI for everybody, is my percentage of profit that I want to reach. How do I reach the intent I set in the beginning? And if I keep that as one KPI, am I not ensuring that I have alignment at all levels?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, because everyone is speaking the same language. The execution of it is what will be unique to each and every function.
Exactly. And everybody knows exactly what, we know exactly what they are working towards, right? So there was no one in the organization who would be less important
True.
than another.
Very true.
And it would also contribute to breaking down those silos.
I think breaking down of silos should also be another KPI, or the standard way of doing things,
Agree.
because when people say no, they're responsible, or it's team X or team Y, and there are those walls that are there, they are actually the biggest blockers for anything to thrive or to
Yeah.
succeed. So that needs to be broken down. Everyone is valuable.
And especially we need to ensure that, we don't have conflicting KPIs between departments. Example, if my marketing team's KPIs is I need to bring 200 leads a month,
Yeah.
right? Sales, they need to bring a revenue of X number. Finance, they need to bring down costs, the KPI. Now, for me to be able to generate and attract 200 leads a month, I need to invest money,
Yep.
right? I need to spend on my marketing campaigns. I need to go out and see clients. I need to do so. My sales, for me to materialize my sales, I need to spend time. I need to spend money. I need to go visit my clients. I need to convince them. And if those 200 leads that marketing is bringing, none of them is converting into revenue.
Then we
None
have a
of them is
problem.
converting into sales. So how would I make that revenue? So then you have that conflict between sales and marketing,
Yeah.
right? You are not bringing me good leads. Then marketing will say, what is a good lead for you, right?
Yep.
Oh, you don't know how to sell. Your sales playbook is outdated. That's why you're not able to convert into sales, right? And
Yep.
then finance, but we need to bring down costs, so we can't send you to that conference. We need to bring down costs, so we can't send you to visit, XYZ client. So those conflicting KPIs, we need them to go away to be able to break silos as well.
And I think one of the critical things is for people to understand why a certain KPI, let's even in the standard way of doing things, why it is there. Because sometimes we fail to understand or define what a good lead is, who constitutes to a good lead. Then when it comes, because marketing can do what they need and they bring in the leads, but the conversion is dismal. So why that disconnect?
And this
So
is where, sorry to cut you down there,
yeah.
this is where revenue operations come in. Revenue operations is a fairly new discipline where you really go about breaking down silos between sales, marketing,
Yeah.
and customer experience. They are the one who give you, they manage your content, they manage your data, ensuring that you have the data to be able to take the right decisions. They are the one who have access and control over all the system to make sure that all systems are aligned, all systems are working as they should, All systems are there to ensure that you're meeting your objectives, right? They are the one who actually mine all your data for you and give you real-time insights to be able to break those silos and to be able to really make sure that you're hitting your revenue targets, right?
Yeah.
So revenue operations, and it doesn't need to cost a lot of money to put in place the right revenue operations structure,
Yeah.
right? It all boils down to what you want to do, what are the tools you have available on hand, what are the processes you have in place, how are you educating your people to make sure that they are able to deliver. Once you have, you know, you have the processes, you have the operating model in place, then you can invest in systems.
True. Absolutely. I think for all functions within an organization, the processes that we lay, you know, the processes that we put down, whatever we deem to be a foundation in every function, can be an enabler, a growth enabler, or it can be the perfect recipe for doom
Mm, exactly.
because there are conflicting interests.
Yes.
Where when people don't understand why certain actions have to be taken, and everyone is pulling in different directions, it doesn't matter how the latest technology in place, the processes and automation is top notch. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. As long as people are pulling in different directions, you might as well just close shop and call it a day.
Yeah.
So in as much as we are talking about rethinking growth from intent to innovation, everyone must, it's all hands on deck. Failure to which, then, it doesn't matter how strong the exco team is, or senior management. It doesn't matter if they're saying one, but if that is not cascaded down to the lowest cadre, then all that effort is futile. So we need
Exactly.
to change.
There needs to be a mindset change, definitely. And I think we should not lose focus of the intent.
Yeah.
When we lose focus of the intent and when we don't communicate enough around the intent, we've seen it, right? In all companies, they have some kind of town hall that happens every
Yep.
quarter, right? And in those town halls, we mostly talk about what happened the quarter before.
Yep.
We would communicate figures, we would communicate actions we took, etc. But all those can those town halls be used to provoke mindset change? Can those town halls be used to really think about the future? Can those town halls be used to communicate and re-communicate on the intent, on the whys we are doing things, on how each person, each role contributes to that intent? Because figures you can publish, right? Every
Yep.
month. You can publish every quarter. You can do that by email, you can do that by a system. You don't need to have a town hall to communicate how much revenue I generated, how much profit I generated. So things that can be communicated outside a town hall, let's use those facilities that we have and use the forums where we have people in contact. And instead of making it a one-way traffic communication, we make it a collaboration. We make it a debate. We take ideas from the newest person in the company. We take ideas from the oldest person in the company. We take ideas from the attendant to the CEO to everybody in between, right? Where we really generate uh, that forum. We really generate that space where people are able to contribute into the business. And if we rethink about what we were talking earlier about what innovation is, creating new value in new ways, why not use these forums to have a problem in there, discuss about a problem and start generating new ideas,
True. True.
right?
No, absolutely. I'm trying, I'm actually in the back of my mind, I'm going, when it comes to town halls, most of the time it's people being told. It's never an avenue most of the time for people to report back.
Yeah.
So why not take it as an opportunity for people to actually report back what's working, what's not working, what do we think we can do? Because yes, it actually reminds me of, people going to a meeting and they say this meeting could have been an email.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
the percentages, the numbers, they can be an email.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not saying they cannot be communicated in a town hall. By all means, communicate that. However, if that is the only sole objective of the town hall, then you're missing the point.
Yeah. And I believe that there should be that platform of sharing, right? What we've often seen as well, we make sharing become a task. This quarter, this team is going to share on something. This quarter, the next quarter, somebody else is going to share. And most of the time, we take the most junior member in the team. You
The
have
most
to
shy.
present this. You have to present this. But it doesn't become a collaborative sharing session. What if during the town hall, the head of HR came in together with a person from another department to discuss, to animate a discussion around KPIs, for example? Why this KPI is in place? How is it going to help us as a business? Right? Something that is completely out of your domain, but you are able to talk about it and you are generating that sharing, that collaboration between people.
True. I recently had the pleasure of having a visit in another organization, and I was so impressed by the chief people officer. He was not the sole communicator. Various people in that function were delivering messages in pertaining people or pertaining the organization without just looking at the chief people officer. And I think that's, the kind of culture we need to inculcate, whereby, the communication or sharing of insights is not limited to senior most members, you know,
Yes.
or the junior most members who are very shy and will say whatever we tell them to say.
Yeah.
We need to change that, and collaborate in a very positive manner that people are actually willing to take on that change that is being implemented.
I'm going to be very blunt. I
Mhm.
think when we are having these sessions or in an organization, let's leave our egos aside
I'll
and
drink to that.
let's go in with a collaborative and sharing mindset. I may be the most junior person in an organization,
Yeah,
but I have knowledge of how the new generation works. I am the new generation. You can use me as a test case,
true.
right?
How many
Right?
people are open enough to that?
Yes. I am the CEO of the company. Yes. I have responsibilities, I have decisions. But does that stop me from spending one day every month in a function at the lower end of the ladder to really understand the pain points of these people?
Ideally, that is what that should happen. But when egos come into play, we forget that we forget that we did not have our first jobs as CEOs. We all started somewhere. You started
Exactly.
as an intern, you started as a student, you started as an apprentice. It doesn't matter. And thereafter, you grew through the ranks.
Yeah,
So, why do we forget so often how, the journey started and how we got to where we got? Because we waste opportunities to coach, to mentor, to actually hear from
exactly.
the horse's mouth. So, yes, on this
And
third
you
pillar,
know that people feel when you're genuine. People feel when you really want to help.
true.
People feel when we really want to learn, right? So if I'm just doing it to tick a box because HR decided that we need to be closer to our employees, right?
It's
I'm holding coffee sessions because HR decided we need more engagement.
yeah. I
You know,
think
it's
no. I think we really misuse engagement for what it's supposed to be. As far as I'm concerned, I'll give you an example. Learning and development is actually an enabler. When I look at the current world as it is, and especially with AI, a lot of jobs are, falling through the cracks because automation has come in, and the next thing you know, the job really changes. So when we fail to embrace, learning and development, preparing people for future skills, what is required in the future, the now and the future, yeah, having people learn skills on a cross-functional, way, because more often than not, when redundancies are declared, people are let go. But after a short while, the same company is going to be recruiting.
yeah,
Now, if your people had been enabled in a certain way, you had actually mapped out which are these critical skills that are needed, then you could have realigned the roles. And if you were to let people go, you have a lesser number to consider. And with a lesser number to consider, you really don't have to worry about, culture. Do they know the systems? Do they know all these things? It's pretty much like a plug and play.
yeah.
But more often than not, again, it's a tick box. Why do I have to do this? Why you're spending money? But yeah, I think we've already now jumped to the fourth pillar, which is people.
Yes, we
Yeah,
already are. And I think we've talked about it throughout because people is such a critical component in all, in growth, in everything. If I don't have people, I don't have a company.
true. Although I've seen lately there are people that are starting organizations or companies and using AI. But again,
Well, you have a hotel in China which is completely run by robots. There are no human stuff at all.
okay, it may be
So
efficient, but I don't have the human touch.
exactly, exactly. So yeah. I mean, the funny thing about learning and development is more often, as we're saying, than not, it's a tick box, right? I need to train people in X, Y, Z because it is required, right? And not strangely, but what commonly happens in Mauritius, every company contributes to an learning and development fund with the government for
Hmm.
each and every employee.
Yeah.
And that fund, if you don't use it by the 30th of June every year, you lose that money.
Okay.
So what happens is typically April, May, June are the month where you will have all the trainings. Think of whatever kind of training you have that. Team buildings, they pop up like this because you can do your team building,
Yeah.
right? And you would find all kind of outings being organized for the team, all kind of activities, but only activities which you can claim that fund. Right. So you contribute over the year and then you claim back that money. Now, how much is that activity actually contributing to the growth of the company?
Not much, to be very honest. If you were to be very blunt, not much. Because even when you train, just like technology or digital transformation, the ROI is not immediate. It's a
The
long
ROI
term
is
thing.
not immediate, plus learning is not a one-off affair.
No.
Learning is a continuous process. Learning is something that you need to constantly do. Even if it's a new subject, you need to constantly do it for people, for it to sink in, for people to learn. They need to see how that training is going to help me in my day-to-day operations. How is it going to help me as a person? I mean, basic question, what's in it for me? What am I learning?
Why do
Why
I have?
am I learning that? What use is going to be? Is it going to help me in my job? Is it going to help me in my life? Is it going to look good on my CV?
True.
right? So we need to ensure all these are happening, and all that comes from strategy, from the intent,
The why.
the why. And then how do I build that in with innovation? So if we keep talking to our people about the intent, about the ways we do things, about our culture, not culture just to look beautifully in documents or in words or on the wall,
Yeah.
but really how do we walk the talk, right? So that for me is really into, you know, how people is that common denominator across. So if I was saying pillars, I would actually scrap that people pillar and I would put it as a beam. That
Yeah.
structural foundation, and all the pillars stand on that.
People is a slab and these others are beams.
Yeah.
And frankly speaking, I know we have had this discussion very heavy on an organization's point of view, but the principles of it can also apply in our personal lives. You
Yes.
know, why do you do what you do? If you want, for example, you want to build your house, maybe you want to buy a piece of land, what is it that you need to do? Saving culture, maybe you need to look at your budgets, your expenses, where are you bleeding, etc.
Yeah.
All this, when you have a 360 review of it, you can apply it on a professional angle, but also on a personal angle. Because everything we do, our why. Why did you go for X certification?
Yeah.
What's the end game? Yeah. So from a business perspective, the idea here is to grow consistently. Yeah. So that we avoid peaks are good. It's good to
Mhm.
have a peak. But when you
But you'll get
come
into the
down,
down.
exactly. So the moment you start coming down, it's going to be very exhausting and it's very easy to lose hope. So
Yes.
how can you avoid that? Have that consistent growth, you know, reviewing all your targets, reviewing your strategy, reviewing you have the right setup, reviewing you are not having duplications or waste in your processes, and having honest, candid conversations, because there's nothing as bad as having yes men around you.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. And to touch back, on that personal, how do I use it in my personal life? If you are working in a job you, that you know is going to be taken over by technology, what are you doing to reinvent yourself?
Yeah.
And you need to start thinking early, right? Because your job may not be in danger today, it may not be in danger 1 year down the line, but changes are happening, and they're
Yeah.
happening faster than we imagine, right?
True. True.
So, how do we bring in that critical thinking, analytical thinking? I was looking at a statistic the other day. I think I shared it with you, Rosie, around
Yeah.
what are the skills that are going to be valuable and most needed in 2030.
Critical
There were
thinking was
only
one of them.
two, there were only two IT or technology related skills. The rest were leadership, social, social competencies, social
Yeah.
capabilities,
Yeah.
analytical thinking, structural thinking, right?
Yeah.
So how do I reinvent myself? I need to start setting my intent now, and then I need to work towards that intent. And that intent, do I take it lightly, or do I dig deep and do that root cause analysis? Why, until I get to the root cause of that intent, the root of that intent, so that I get the motivation to work towards it.
True. Very true. And I think it's critical, it's very important that people take the time, be it on a business perspective or a personal perspective, to be very intentional with why they do the things they do,
Yes.
why they get into whatever it is that they do. And in case you do not like the position you're in right now, you've not been glued to it. You can actually change.
Yes,
Take those steps to change. Will it be easy? No. Will it be worth it? Yes, it will. So
definitely.
look at it as, what do I stand to gain in the sense on a long term perspective, or as they say it in the gym, short term pain for long term gain.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. You make
So
sure that you move before you are swept away.
yeah, very, very, very important. I think we have, covered this topic in its breadth.
Mm,
And for me, one of the key takeaways is you cannot afford to stagnate and be comfortable. You can't, because the world is changing with every passing moment.
yeah,
Yeah, you wake up and there's a new technology or a new way of doing things. So how can I reinvent myself and prepare for myself for what the future demands? So be it from a business perspective, like myself, who is a startup, how can I ensure that the structures that I'm putting in place will help this organization thrive? you know if I am employed, how can I ensure that whatever it is that I'm doing is contributing to the growth and long-term sustainability of the organization? It's all hands on deck. So that for me are the key takeaways. Asha?
I think for me, having that intent, having that vision is very, very important. And that would be the founding stone of making sure that I am growing consistently, resiliently, and sustainably. And I'm able to delay my decline, or I'm able to move it up. The second thing that I'd like to for you to take away also is that for every job, for every role, for every task that you do in the company, we should really rethink about how we design them. One, how is that task contributing to the vision? How is that task contributing to the revenue? How is that task contributing in reducing costs or optimizing costs? Because today, I don't think when we design jobs, when we design uh, tasks, we think about these. But these are what is going to give me the input on making sure that I'm sustainable and I'm able to communicate to each and everyone in the organization how they are important to the organization,
True.
right?
Very,
And then
very true.
the third thing is to break those silos. Let's have a one or two key KPIs that we all work towards, and we leave ego at the door, please.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Asha, I cannot thank you enough. Wow. I mean, I cannot believe it's close to 2 hours since we began.
I
But
think
the
this is a
session,
subject we could talk on and on and on about.
very, very true. And one of the key, one of the intentions we had when we were having the discussion to do with this topic was to plant the seed to make people reevaluate what it is that they're doing, what they're doing right, what they need to improve on. And I cannot thank you enough for taking your time to join us. I appreciate it's quite late in Mauritius, but I really thank you for your time, for the insights, and for those that joined us online. I'm very, very grateful. This this topic, I think it speaks to everyone in one way or another. It doesn't matter if you're a business owner, an employee, or whatever setup you're at. The insights can be applied on a personal level, and the intention here is to prepare yourself for the future. Asha, thank you so much. I really
Thank you for having
appreciate.
me.
Yeah. um should you find yourself in this side of the hood, please give us a shout, and we will give you the absolute Kenyan hospitality.
Definitely, that's my country, the country of my heart.
Yeah,
I'll definitely do it.
brilliant. So I thank you. I wish you a lovely evening or night ahead. And for those
Thank
that
you.
joined us online, be it on YouTube or on LinkedIn, I thank you very much. And I will see you in 2 weeks' time for the next episode on the Unplugged with Ross series. I thank you and I wish you all a good night. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.